Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. A major theme that I want to establish early in this podcast is dispelling this utterly ridiculous concept that we have across this country of trash fish. The idea that we would categorize any native species of fish in fresh or salt water as trash is completely ridiculous. It is a old school mentality that has got to die off once and for all. And every opportunity that I have to dispel the myths and just the false ideas that float around out there that have led certain species to be kept kind of tucked away in those shadows and being called trash fish or undesirable species, I'm going to highlight those things and tear down those ideas. This is a term that I have battled since my inception as an angler. And while most of my personal experience as an angler has been in freshwater, where the idea of trash fish seems to abound at every corner, I'm finding now, since moving to Florida and getting more involved in saltwater, that saltwater too has its trash fish. And among those, insanely, is the jack crevalle. I don't know if the issue is just sheer abundance of the species or their lack of table fare. Now, we can sit here and argue how palatable the fish is, but the one thing that can't be argued is that these things fight damned hard. It is an indisputable fact that even the biggest haters simply have to submit to. The jack crevalle is pound for pound one of the strongest fish in all of saltwater. Now, like many people, my personal experience with the jack crevalle has not been much more than dealing with the occasional groups of 10, 15 pounders at the high end, blitzing on massive fields of bait fish. But people need to understand that this is a species of fish that can get monstrous. And curiously, while they have all the same sporting qualities, characteristics, and even physical appearance of their more notorious and globally sought-after cousin, the giant trevally, jack crevalle have still largely failed to catch on in the mainstream. But the guy that you're going to hear from today has taken what's already a pretty hard-fighting fish at its average size, and he has broken through and revealed a whole other level that these species can get to. On Instagram, he's David Rocca. And while Instagram serves to be a great snapshot of the absolutely massive jacks that this guy catches and physical proof of what he can do with a rod and reel and how big these fish can get, I didn't realize the layers of his development as a man and as an angler until we had this conversation. David immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba at a very young age, and his story outlines a very hard reset and growth as an angler from a really interesting perspective. In Cuba, he was fishing with very limited resources, and it was essentially sustenance fishing. Cane poles, hand lines, having basically nothing. And during the course of this conversation, he really highlights his journey as an angler, coming to America, adapting to a rod and a reel, and growing in his hardware and upgrading his gear, ultimately mastering the pursuit specifically of these massive jack crevalle from land with giant artificial lures, giant plugs, much like you see with the giant trevally. I'd go so far as to say that David Rocca is more dialed in on giant jacks than anyone else that you will find. Not only is this a guy that I had a really good time hearing from and someone who paints a really vivid picture of growth as an angler, this is also somebody I'm very eager personally to go and fish with. When I look at the photos of the jacks that this guy catches and the aftermath of them burning through drag, destroying tackle, straightening hooks, and just causing pure chaos, I'm very eager to acquire the necessary gear and link up with this guy in the very near future. I'm hoping that by the time that this episode is dropped, we will have been able to get together, because this is a type of fishing that I think you're going to find really interesting from a very humble guy from very humble beginnings, and you are not going to want to miss this one. David Rocca, I'm glad to have you on here. Been a fan for a while. I know I ran across your page. I think it was, your main deal is those giant jacks from land with those huge lures that you're throwing. That's how I found you. I don't know if that's been like kind of become part of your identity, but I know that's how I know you. But man, I knew when I was putting this podcast together, you were one of like the top guys in mine, because I feel like what you're doing is like, you're not really chasing the rarest of fish, but the way that you're doing it really, really interests me. And that's kind of like been part of the motivation behind reaching out to you. But you got to tell me about this surf fishing, surf casting, land-based. I don't know what you want to call it, but popping.
It's a mixture, right? You gotta be where the fish are at mainly. The jacks, have you seen a jack before? Like in the water, they go crazy. Like they move side to side. They're always running, like they're chasing a bait fish.
So I have not lived in Florida long, like 4 years. So but prior to me living here, I was mostly a freshwater guy. But I mean, I still dabbled in saltwater. I lived in South Carolina, and I lived in Corpus Christi for a while in Texas. So I was like, I eased into the saltwater thing here and there, but still. I mean, I'm still, a novice, but the jacks, I mean, we have them here in Southwest Florida. I live in Naples, but I mean, I fish around the Caloosahatchee and around Fort Myers and Sanibel and all our areas. And we have jacks, but nothing like the ones that I'm seeing you pull. Like not even the same wavelength of fish. Like totally, it's almost like I'm wondering if there's like a subspecies bit, but I see the way that they go crazy blitzing. And like out of nowhere, there'll be times where I'm even up in like fresh water. It's weird. It's really weird. I'll be sitting there on a peaceful day, maybe relaxing in the canoe, and out of nowhere, it's like a football field size, like,
oh wow,
like eruption of chaos goes off, and these jacks are blowing up like crazy. So I mean, it's easy to get excited about them. So when I start doing a little bit of Google searching or browsing social media, and then I see these colossal monsters that you're catching, I was like, oh my God, the things look like GTs.
Takes work.
So I'm interested. I'm interested in like where that began. Like I'm always interested to kind of know people's like formation as an angler, or like where they started. But just tell me how you got into that scene.
Well, I started at the lowest. Basically, I'm from Cuba. I grew up in the Sierra in Cuba, so like the mountains, and over there, like we fished with traditional handlines. So in the Sierras, you got this underwater wells, and when it rains, just like a river forms, and all of the big shrimp. Have you seen those big shrimp, the freshwater shrimp that are like 15 inches, like 20 inches?
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of them. Is that where they're getting them?
We used to get bags and bags of those, and when it used to flow like very heavily, the catfish would also come out of the caves from the Sierra, and you would just go there on the next morning with the machete and like cut them and throw them into the bag, and just basically get as much as you could, and you bring it home, give it to some friends, and everything was getting eaten. So back then, like when that didn't happen, it was just in handlines. We used to fish with handlines. We used to get a crab or an eel or a shrimp and fish with catfish, tilapia. We used to have something similar to snakeheads, but I think they called them big mouth sleepers.
Okay, yeah. Well, we have those here in Florida now. So
yeah, but the ones in Cuba, they grow really big.
Oh, okay.
They have a lot of meat, so that was the top price fish that you could ever get, like you could ever catch. And I did that. I started fishing since I was like 1. My dad used to take me out to fish, and he used to tie me up by the waist He would find the tree, tie me up by the waist with the long rope so that I couldn't get close enough to the water, so that I wouldn't get
Oh
dragged
my
in with a
God.
big fish. Because you're fishing handlines and you can't really let it go because like you probably have like 50, 70 yards of line. It was very hard back then to like find fishing line and hooks. We used to make our own. And I did that until I was 13 that I came to the United States. And
Oh
I came
wow.
here and I didn't know what to fish for because like I used to log into YouTube and seeing all of these YouTubers catching peacock
Yeah.
bass and
Yeah.
snook. I'm like, what is that? I was like, who fishing for catfishing here? Like I gotta meet those guys.
Right.
Back then in Cuba, catfish was all there was because it took over everything. It took over all of the species over there. It ate them up.
Yeah, catfish will do that. That it's like
Yeah,
saltwater, freshwater. I was talking to a buddy of mine, a friend of mine. He's got a guy named Josh Dolan. He lives up in Virginia. He's been kind of like my partner in all of this. So like when people watch my podcast or whatever, they're going to be seeing him a lot. But anyway, I've gone up there and fished with him a few times, and I went up there for the very first time to fish with him for snakeheads of all things, northern
yeah,
snakeheads, not like what we have down here in like these tidal marshes in Virginia. And like the northern snakehead is the one that like made all the news, made all the big buzz.
hmm
And I go up there kind of thinking, okay, well, this is Frankenfish. This place is going to be out of control. It's going to be snakeheads all over the place, jumping in the
yeah,
boat, trying to bite us. And I quickly realized they have a much bigger problem where he's at with blue catfish. It is, and
yeah,
I don't want to hijack the topic that we're on, but I just had to mention it. The catfish that he deals with in like the Chesapeake Bay area and just the different rivers that they have. I mean, you could walk across these things. They were in like
yeah,
6 inches of water. They're in 40 feet of water. You can catch them on top water. You can catch them on the bottom, on
yeah,
lures, on baits. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Way worse than the snakeheads.
yeah,
I think they alone are probably standing in the way of those snakeheads from ever taking off because those blue catfish there are out of control. But that's interesting. I did not know that about you. I mean, I had gathered that you're Cuban, but I love a
yeah.
story like that where there's like humble beginnings, especially for fishermen. I think
Mhm.
if you start at like that level, I mean, I just feel like when you have that kind of story, your appreciation for the kind of fishing that we have now is
Oh yeah,
probably way bigger than, hell, I mean, we live in Florida. It's a lot of
yeah,
rich kids out there fishing that may not appreciate what they have to the same degree. But
yeah.
but
Like when you're a fisherman, like it's in your blood. Like my
yeah,
dad taught me it. Like I was 7, 8 years old, and I was sneaking out the house whenever it would
yeah,
rain. Go to the river, get catfish, sell them, whatever. I used to make more than my dad, and my dad was uh, he was awarded #1 ophthalmologist in Latin America twice.
oh wow, okay,
And I used to make more money than him because I used to go to get catfish and I used to sell it for dog food and that kind of stuff. Because in Cuba, even though like you're a top doctor, you're doing like 20, 30 eye surgeries a day, you're still making $1 a day,
oh wow,
even if you're a doctor. So I used to go and fish and I used to make money and I used to joke around with him like, hey, you're gonna have to join me one of these days.
that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've seen
So
your pictures. I know I was scrolling. I mean, I scrolled all the way to the bottom of your page, looking
yeah,
at all your stuff, and I know I'd seen some pictures that I meant to ask about. It looks like you were like maybe you had gone back. I don't know. You're like holding sticks. You and a couple other guys like sticks, like cane
oh
poles, or
yeah,
they
yeah.
were doing
That's
something.
that's what it is.
Was that a visit home? Was that just tapping
Yeah,
into the roots?
that's at home. You over there, you have two options. You can fish with the hand line. The problem is there's no market over there. Like you can't get hand lines. Like long hand lines, it would only be if they send it from the U.S. So what you do
Okay.
is if you get like 50 yards of hand line, you can cut it into a piece and make like a 10-foot rod, tie it to the tip, and now you can reach into some like pockets or like spots and just put it down with a buoy on, get the
Hmm.
bite, swing out the fish,
Yeah.
and that I mean, not having the proper tackle it, it created like certain situations that you were like, no way. Like, for example, we used to get tarpon in Cuba, but the way we used to get it, it was insane. We didn't have long lines, so we used a tin rope and a hook made out of steel from a friend of ours, and basically you hook a tilapia
Uh-huh.
into the hook, you throw it into the current, and you tie that line to a horse. You couldn't tie it to yourself, but the tarpon
Did you
wasn't
say
gonna
to a
see.
horse?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, this is
You
awesome.
couldn't tie it to yourself because like you were gonna get pulled in. So we tied it to the horse. We got the bite and we hit the horse. We're on top of the horse. We hit the horse and the horse pulls out the tarpon. We used to do that and it was
Oh my
the craziest
gosh.
thing ever.
I would
Like as
pay
soon
to
as
see
you
that.
hook that tarpon, it would be like a jet ski coming out of the water.
It's such a backwards world we live in that I feel like the people that are over there would die to come and fish with the kind of gear that we have
Yeah,
here, and that yet here I am. I have the gear and the resources at my disposal, but like I would give anything to go and like see that in person. That's
yeah.
crazy. That's awesome though.
It was very raw.
I feel like when you I don't know. I feel like if you get good with gear like that, you probably get really damn good with gear that's more advanced. So it's probably a good thing to kind of
Yeah,
build like your appreciation for fishing on a foundation like that.
that's
Because I
that's
would think,
exactly what happened to me.
yeah, I would think that it's much more fulfilling for somebody like you to come here and have the different sort of resources. But I'm curious, like, so when you travel, like when you visit home or whatever, you can't bring the gear you have now, or do they not let
So
you, or do you just don't bother with it?
I I came to the United States in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back once, and it was to see my grandmother. She was dying, and I had to go there and say goodbye.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I fished for one day because like my old friends, they were dragging me out the house, like carrying me, like let's go, let's go. I
Yeah.
said, you got fish in the U.S., so you gotta come here and teach us how to do it.
Yeah.
And I bought them some hairlines and a lot of hooks and everything, and they were the happiest that they could be, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Well, you were like the Cuban Santa Claus then.
Yeah,
Show up and give them
pretty
a bunch
much.
of gear. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
pretty
that's
much.
awesome. I saw that picture and I'm like, I got to ask about what that's all about. But that's good. It's like, I've been kicking around this idea. I tell my wife all the time. I'm like, for some reason, like obviously I plan out like different kind of trips every year that I want to go and do. But like for
Yeah,
some reason, like deep within like my soul, I want to like map out a trip like weeks long to just
yeah,
travel the country to all the places I used to fish when I was a kid. I
yeah,
like for whatever reason, as the years go on, I have like this greater desire just to go back and like stand where I
yeah,
learned to fish. And
yeah,
it's like, I don't know, I almost desire doing that more than going to some of these remote places. But it's like, I don't know, I feel like you need that sort of reset every now and then to kind of
yeah.
to keep you grounded, to keep
You
you
kind of need
appreciating what you're
to,
doing.
yeah, you kind of need to go back to where you started, and I do that very often. But we'll get to that in later. So like mainly after I came to the United States, it was like very tough time. It was four of us, me, my little sister, my dad, my mom, and in Cuba they were top doctors. But in here, my dad had to work at a Red Lobster cleaning dishes for 2 years, and while going to while going to nursing school, so like the first 2 years in the U.S., we lived in one room apartment,
Oh
two
wow.
beds on the floor, a little kitchen, and my dad would go into work around 6 p.m. and he would come back on like maybe like 6 in the morning again. He used to sleep a little bit, and during the day he used to go to school. So like he would get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep
Mhm.
while working and going to school and learning English. And my mom used to take me to school, and it was this big deal that you gotta work your ass off
Right.
until you get into some into some stability, you know, because when you go to the country, everything is new. You got to start from scratch. And what happened was that the 20 years or the 20 something years that my parents lived in Cuba and studied over there, it all came to zero. They had to start all over again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
imagine being a top dog there and starting from zero.
That's
That's
wild.
insane. And after those 2 years, they took their nursing exams and they passed the board. Like you could speak to them in English and they wouldn't understand you, but they passed
Right.
the board
Yeah.
somehow on the first try. So for those 2 years, I couldn't really fish. I couldn't do anything. I
Mhm.
used to be this kid that was outside of his house all day. I would go to school, come back from school, eat something, then I'm out again. I'm going
Right. Yeah.
fishing. And then it's 9 p.m. and I'm not home and everybody's looking for me because I'm fishing. And then get back home, get grounded, go to school, and then fish after school
Yeah.
so that they would know and then come back home. And come here and for 2 years staying in a room by yourself, sucked. It really sucked. It
Yeah.
changed me a lot. I used
That's
to have friends over there. Everybody knew me, and here you have to start from zero. You have
right.
to develop a new personality, and mm, I realized that like how much I really changed when I went back to Cuba after 8 years.
Mhm.
When nobody recognized me, I didn't like his Spanish songs. I didn't like. I mean, I completely changed. I
Yeah.
like I say, I Americanized myself. I started listening to rock and all of that, and it was a really big change on me. And I think that fishing got me through like the toughest part of my life, really, because like after those 2 years, we kind of got some oxygen, from less work and just less pressure from a from an economic perspective, And after that, I started going out with my dad, and we used to fish in the canals and Homestead. That's where we started,
Okay.
and we used to throw handlines, and there were these big carps that we couldn't figure out how to catch. We'd throw worms, we'd throw chicken guts, we
Yeah. That's got
couldn't.
to be the big grass carp, huh?
We would throw shrimp, the same things that we tried in Cuba, and we would never figure them out. One day we got there in the afternoon, and there was this lady throwing bread to the ducks,
Oh yeah.
and there comes the carps and just eats the bread. I'm like, wow. Went to the general, we got a piece of bread, threw the handline in, and then go, don't bring it in, finding it, big carp. And like, we had never had like a fish of that size before, like in
yeah.
here. And it was the craziest thing ever. And we started doing that for like a year more. And we used to go there in the afternoons, and we used to get this big carp with handlines. And then I think it was my 15th birthday. One of my uncles he gave me a fishing rod, and I started using it, and I got good with it. And now, like my dad used to fish with hairlines, and I used to fish with rods, and I would get to the fish a little bit faster than him because I used to cast further and all.
Yeah.
And then my dad tried the the fishing rod, and he couldn't deal with it.
right.
I
Yeah.
was out fishing him every time. Like I was the one teaching him now how to fish.
Mhm.
And we moved to West Palm Beach, and over here, like we have the ocean like 15 minutes away. And I was like 16, 17, yeah, 16 years old. And then that's when the saltwater started. That's when I started fishing for jacks. I had a friend of mine. He knew that I liked to fish, so he's like, I'm gonna take you to catch jacks. He wasn't on the same level that I am right now as knowledge. He mainly did it because like you can get a mullet, put it on the hook, and you would catch like 5 pound jacks very easily.
Mhm.
And I started there, but I started with headlines. I didn't have rods like he did.
Oh, that
And
sounds dangerous.
the first day that I got there, it was a mullet run. I didn't know what mullet run was. I had no idea what it was. I get there and I see this water boiling. I'm like, what is that thing? And then I see this big school of jacks come in, and I hook a mullet and put it down. That jack smokes on my line. Like I was just in 20 pound line. So
oh
imagine
yeah.
that. Like I lost that jack and I was bleeding after I lost it because the hairline it cut me so deep I just couldn't stop it.
Oh yeah.
And that day I didn't land the fish. It was all like smoking me, like I was getting burns on my fingers, and he was doing okay. He was catching like 5, 10 pounders, and back then that was a really big fish for me.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I finally saved enough money to like get a rod, but I was still like my rods weren't good enough. Like a 3500 size reel and like a ugly stick, whatever. When those jets were coming in, oh man, forget about it. They will smoke me.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'm like, I started going with my dad, and he's like, you know what you gotta do? You gotta get some wire. You gotta get some heavy line.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get. We went there with 60-pound mono and some wire. Like back then, like my dad thought that saltwater you would fish with wire, and that was the only thing that you used because the fish would break you off. So I fished with wire, and we used to get like this 10 pounders or so, and it was fun. But that year when it got colder around December, that's when the big fish started showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't land one. We would hook this big jacks, and we just couldn't land it. We couldn't land it, and my dad got like really like fed up. It's like, all right, he's always like conservative about saving money and all. He's like, I'm done. We're gonna go to Dick's. We're gonna buy 100-pound mono, number 10 wire, a shark hook, and we're gonna land one of these jacks today. So we got there early to this bridge in West Palm Beach. It was the outgoing tide, and I get a ladyfish, and that was the main bait back then. We hooked the ladyfish head, throw it out, and the jacks they'll eat that cut bait better than live mullet.
Oh wow.
The big ones they're a little more they're lazier than the younger ones. Like the big jacks, like the 40-pounders, they are lazy fish. They will chase a bait, but if they have an easy meal, they will take it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. So that day he put the gloves on, like this construction worker glove. He got a handline. I got a handline. He gets the bite first and started bringing the fish, and the fish was taking hard runs, but like really hard. And what happens is when you got mono, you hold the line like this, and you expect it to go in a like straight, like when it's pulling. But what happens is when you got a lot of pressure and you hold the mono, it goes like this. And the mono, like you hold it and the mono is going like that. Let me show you. Like this. And what happens is that mono is heading over here.
Oh man.
And with that jack, you should take a run. I mean, you couldn't do much.
Slapping.
You have to let it go. You have to let go of the mono. You couldn't hold it. And we landed fish, and when I look at my dad, he was bleeding. Like he had, as if it was a whip on his hand, and I still got scars.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That was 6 years ago, probably.
Well, those are good story starters right there, like tattoos.
We landed that fish, and then I hooked another one next night. That next night, and I was bleeding out. I had scars everywhere, and I mean I was happy because like we finally got that big fish that was getting away. That's the big thing about fishing. Like the big fish gets away.
Oh yeah,
yeah. How do I get better? How do I get my tackle better? How do I get that fish? And like we started doing that, and sometimes like it was like tough to land them with hand lines because it was an outgoing tide, and the tide was going into the bridge. So you hook a jack out there and would go under the bridge. You're done. He's gonna cut you off, even if you have 100-pound mono.
Yeah,
it would just cut you off with the bridge, and you couldn't do much. But we figured out that if you hook the jack, bring it closer, he'll go under the bridge. We will let it go past the bridge, and I will get a rod and with the jig. Throw the jig, smack the mono, and fight him from the other end of the bridge.
That's outrageous.
He used to get it out like that. And we did that for a while until I was like 17 years old, and then I got better fishing rods, and I started with the artificial stuff, like throwing small lures, just catching 5 pounders and so on. And then I got to a point that I was like, how do I get this big fish? I needed to find how to get those big fish because like even the hand light it wasn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm like, in Cuba, we used to get this big tarpon with just a piece of line. How come I'm not landing this? And they're like, oh, I gotta go back in time. You know, I went to Home Depot, I got myself a rope.
Yeah.
I went to the tackle shop. I got a piece of 200-pound model, got a big hook, and I stood there on top of the bridge waiting for the tide switch with the live motor like this, like 15 inches. Hook it on the top over here, put that motor down, and that jack came up. Destroyed it, and I held on to the headline, and he was just burning me. I stopped it, bring it in. I tried putting it into the net. It didn't fit in the net.
Oh my gosh!
It was a bridge net. We knew that was going to happen eventually. It just didn't fit into the net. It didn't fit, and then I finally get it. The net rips out, and then I was just stuck in there. And thankfully, there was another fisherman close by. He let me use his net, put it in, finally get it out. When I got that jack, it was like 42, 43 pounds. It's huge.
Oh wow, that's a monster.
I hold it and I lift it up like that, and I took a picture of it and sent it to my dad. And he didn't know what I did. He's like, "How you did that alone?"
Oh yeah.
Even when we were a team, we still couldn't land him. We couldn't land him. It was just too much. And then I sent him a picture, and he laughed. He laughed a lot. He's like, "Yeah, you're a monster."
Yeah.
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 And then after that, I kind of got confident. I got really confident with the hand line because, like,
Yeah.
there wasn't a jack that could get away.
Yeah.
There wasn't a jack that could get away from that bridge. And until like one day I was I started using 100-pound leader on that rope. I started with 100 and 125 until one day it was in May. That's when the big ones showed up. I put down a mullet and I hooked it like maybe a 35-pounder, got it out, released it. I hooked another one, released it. And then it got really rough. That was like around 11 a.m. And it got really rough that day. I ran out of bait. I went back to the shore, started casting some mullet, and I couldn't get anything that day. So I couldn't, and I went back next week. And I tried catching mullet, and it was really hard, really hard. I spent the whole day trying to get a damn mullet. I couldn't get one. And then I finally got one around like 5 p.m. And I'm like, all right, this is my ticket. And it was May. I knew the big fish were going to be there. I went to the top of the bridge, put the mullet down, nothing. 5 p.m., 6 p.m., nothing. Right around 8 p.m., it starts getting dark. My mullet is in there like swimming for like 3 hours. That thing was beat. And this huge jack, like I've never seen one that big. Two of them, they come up at the same time for the bait. They were like probably like 50 pounders. I had never seen one that big like before. They come up, they eat the mullet. I set the hook on it, and it was just tugging me, and it bent the hook. I'm like, wow.
Oh man.
So my confidence was at the top, and the hook bent out and went. I'm like, man,
yeah,
that really hurt me. And then I kind of like I missed that chance because like it has been like a year and like a couple of months for me doing the same thing over and over, trying to catch that fish. and I lost it. So I went home. I started doing push-ups, trying to get stronger.
Yeah.
I did push-ups for like a week. I went back. I bought 125 mono. Went back at it again, but the fishes weren't there. I was trying the fishes weren't there. I tried with chunks,
Mhm.
with live bait, the fishes weren't there. And during August, I I go with my dad and we tried the same thing, and we were getting like smaller fish, but like that elusive big fish that you're looking for, it just you couldn't find it again. And then I kind of like we kind of switched to like catching bluefish and that sort of thing until like the right time before for the big sharks will come in. And then I kind of like backed down from it, and then I stopped doing it because I'm like, I lost the big one. I'm not gonna try for a while because like I'm gonna have to wait until next year.
Right. Yeah.
And then we started catching bluefish, but the issue is that when you're chunking bait, you don't know what's gonna eat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're throwing a big piece of ladyfish, big piece of mullet, like anything could come in and eat it.
Right.
And then during July, August, September, that's the time for the big snook. So what used to
Mhm.
happen is we should throw a chunk trying to get a bluefish, and the snook will come in, and we'll just get these 40 snooks back to back. And
Right.
my dad
Yeah.
used to look at me. I used to look at my dad like, what do we do? We gotta release this thing. And my dad used to jump around, like get mad because like we had to release it. But like I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
we can't risk anything for this, so we gotta release it. And then one day I was fishing for moonfish, like 6 pound line, crappie jigs. And there was this big snook on one line of the bridge. And there was this guys that were trying to get snook, like with swim baits and the big
Yeah. Yeah.
gear and all of that. And I'm there with like 6 pound mono and my hairlines in a bucket.
Yeah.
And they looked at me like as if like, what are you doing?
Yes.
And I told I told one of the guys, there's a big snook on the second light. If you go from the left side of the bridge, you cast at it up current, you bring in the lure, most likely you're gonna hook that fish. And he did that, and then a couple minutes later, I see him screaming at me, "Hey, come over, help me out!" I went there. It was like a 40-inch snook. I'm like, "Wow, that's a nice one. You caught it on a lure. That's impressive." And then I told him, "Can I take a picture of it to send it to my dad?" He's like, "No, man, just catch your own fish."
Oh,
I'm
geez.
like, all right. The thing is that like that guy, he didn't even brought a net. I was the one that used my net to land his fish. He said, "Catch your own fish," and I was like, "All right." And that really got to me.
Yeah.
Because like like I didn't have the money to buy none of that gear or anything like that, and he did
Right.
something that I used to see on the internet and YouTube. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, it's real. Like that started happening, and the way that he responded to me, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
So
That's disappointing there.
yeah. So I went home and I told my neighbor about it. He said, like, here, use this shark rod. It was like a 12-foot shark rod, and he gave me a reel. And I went there the next night. I got a big ladyfish, free line it, put it down, bang, big snook. It was like 40, 41 inches. Got it
Yeah.
out with the net,
Lee.
tried it again, bang. I did that for like 3 4 months, and I was catching. I was very effective at it. I was catching 1 2 snooks on the 40-inch mark just about every night,
Yeah.
and I started posting it on Instagram. And then I get all of this attention, like, how do you get it? How do you get it? How do you get it?
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with the name like David Rocca. And
Mhm.
I started posting these pictures of snook, and people didn't know how to get them. And I was using the light baiting, and it was tough to get him because I mean it's a big fish. It's hard to pull, but I was giving it the one thing that they couldn't resist. And it's like a
Yeah.
15, 20-inch ladyfish, and that's when I got the idea of like for big fish. If I want the big fish, I'm gonna have to start using big tackle.
Yep.
There's no other way around it. Just big tackle and big tackle, and then I got obsessed with it. And then I said, how do I catch the biggest jack that I can? I mean, I was pretty much over the handline stuff. I wanted to grow as an fisherman,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my issue also was that I was fishing the one bridge for 5 years. I didn't do anything else because I
Yeah.
fished with my dad, and back then I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. I used to fish with handlines, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, I was in high school. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't do anything. So I was really good at it. I was really good at that bridge, but I couldn't move anywhere else.
Right. Right.
And the issue with that is that even if you try to fish with somebody, they will go into the rod, into the jigs, and back then I just couldn't afford it. I just couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, I was catching bigger fish than all of them together.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't even like my shallow as I said. And then in high school, I got a job at Publix. Started saving money. I got myself a rod.
Yeah.
I started like on Instagram and just learning what people are doing like with the jigs and with the fluorocarbon, whatever, and with the braid and this and that. And I started working on it and on and on. And then I was pretty much like catching fish around the same size, but I was still there at the bridge. And I also got pretty good with artificials, and but I was just there. I was just in one spot. I wasn't growing any longer. Like you would talk about David and be like, oh, he fishes at this place and nobody can beat
Yeah.
him. My friends used to say, dude, you gotta get off that bridge.
Yeah.
You gotta get off, you gotta explore. And that was around 3 years ago, and I switched. I completely switched. I started into college. I got my car, got my rods, and I started experiencing it. Like I knew how the jacks would behave at the bridge. I knew what time they come in, what to use, what tides, but I didn't know about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my niche. I didn't know about anything else, and I started watching this guys from Australia, like the GT Buster,
Yep.
Brooksy, and all those, and the GTs they're pretty similar to jacks. And I always said, wow, I always wanted to get some of this fish on a lure, and I was just trying to figure out who's catching those fish, like who were catching, like who was doing what I wanted to do, who's catching the big jacks on the big lures. And when you look up like in YouTube, like big jacks on poppers, like you will see this blitzes in Louisiana
Right.
and
Right.
people throwing poppers at the blitz, and it was just on like pretty fast. But I had an issue, like that wasn't happening over here. Over here, you have a couple of fish around the year, and that's it. I mean,
Yep.
they do get school up during mullet run. They come in early in the morning into the mullet school, and they eat everything through. I've seen it where you have like 200, 300, 500 jacks around the same size, eating all the way through school, and you're just cooking a fish, getting it out, hooking
Yeah.
it out, and getting broken up, and so on. And I started with like a medium size tackle, like 5,500, 6,500, like 8 foot rods, star rods. I started using that, and then I was I was fishing the beaches and like the inlets, the seawalls, and I was hooking into this big jacks, and I had the same problem as everywhere else, as everybody else before. I was hooking the jacks and I wasn't landing.
Yeah.
I was hooking them on lures and I wasn't landing them at all. Like the hooks would bend out, the poppers were snapping too. I was getting smoked. And I'm like, how do I get over it? And I'm like,
Yeah, right.
I need to step on my gear, you know? And then on 2018, there was a motor run going on, and I messaged this one guy that used to fish at my local inlet, and I really looked up to him because like when you're like 15, 16, 17 years old, you kind of like match up with other people your age are doing.
Yeah.
And what they were doing is 40-pound braid, 60-pound leader at most, on a jig and catching snooks. But I was bored of snooks. I already caught 45, 46-inch snooks before. I wasn't into that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was trying to figure out like what's the next level in this, because like it can't be a 65 undersized reel and an 8-foot rod and me getting smoked. So I started fishing with him, and the first night that I fished with him, he's like, "Here, hold this rod, try it out." When I look at it, it was a 20,000 size reel. I'm like, "What do you use this thing for?" He's like, "Oh, jacks, tarpon, snook." I'm like, "No way." He gave me the surf rod. He put it like in between my legs like that. You know how you fish a surf rod?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Here, hold it. I'm gonna pull on it so that you can see how strong it is." He pulled on it, and I was getting dragged in. I'm like, "Wow, this is what I need."
Yeah.
And that night, I was hooking the fish, but I couldn't land them. And they were tying me up on the rocks. They were getting me through the inlet. That basically the inlet, like at the size of the inlet, is probably 11 foot deep. But then you go into this drop where it goes to 60.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you hook a fish, if you don't got a strong enough drag, they will get you into that edge and into that edge. And if they don't get you into the edge, they're gonna tumble you up in the rocks.
Right. Right.
So like either you have to get them out or you don't get that lure back. And I told him, his name is JB. I told JB, JB, once I become a man, I'm gonna get that rod. Once I get enough money, I'm gonna get that
Right,
rod.
yeah.
And that's the style that I want to do, because that was what the big GT guys were doing. That was what JB was doing, and all the other guys that I looked up to, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I started talking with guys that did that, and like with my friend Danny, he used to catch like big tarpon from bridges on a rod, which was like he was like getting a like 150, 200 pound tarpon from a bridge. That's pretty tough.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's the gear that I needed for the bridge, for the inlets, for the beach. So I got myself a Tortilla, which is this one right here. You're probably seeing familiar.
Yes.
Tortilla dogfight.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen him in your photos. I know I zoomed in. I was like, what is this guy using to catch these things?
Yeah, this is a 2,000 size Tortilla.
Okay.
Or 8,000. The dog fights, they go up to the 8,000 size.
Okay.
And like the Stellas, the new Saltigas, they go up to the 20,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started doing that, but when you're new to it, even if you have the gear, like you don't do as good as you expect. You know,
right,
like,
right.
It's like starting from scratch again.
Yeah.
Because now, like, I was delving into this place where I was using light bait, and I was also getting them like on artificial from time to time. But now I switched to the beaches and the inlets, and no one was doing that. To this day, no one does it.
Yeah, I never really see it. You're like the guy that's doing it.
No one does it, and I really started during the end of the mullet run on 2018. I started throwing poppers at night, and there was this big school of mullets just getting crossed, and the jacks will come in, the sharks will come in, the tarpon, and I was hooking these big jacks and these tarpons with poppers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the blackfish, but I really wasn't landing them because I had the big reels, I had the big rods, but I was still using like 50-pound braid.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was I was I was landing some of them, like the majority, like the 20, 30 pounders, but the
Hmm.
40 pounders, they would just break me off. They would snap my 50-pound braid when I was starting the drag, so it wouldn't get me to the edge of the inlet or wrap me around the rocks.
Yep.
So I was like, what else do I do? Because not even JB uses anything more than 50 pounds.
Hmm.
So that's when I started getting into like, I stepped aside from what was expected to use into something that I myself created, and now other people use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, this is not going to happen anymore. So I switched up to 80-pound braid. Which I got broken off in a couple of times. I lost very big fish on 80-pound braid.
Hmm.
100-pound braid, and I did got broken off once on a 100-pound braid with jack eye. The problem is when you're fishing with like the poppers of this size, most of those fish. I mean, you could cast really far, but let's say that if you are from like a seawall, a jetty, the beach, those fish
Right.
are
Yeah.
not far out. They're pretty close to shore.
Yeah.
They're hugging the rocks. They are swimming close to that seawall, waiting for a mullet to get close so they can use the seawall as an ambush point. The bait
Okay.
can go, I mean, the bait can move like south or north,
Hmm.
but like most of the time it's gonna hug the seawall and move into one direction, and that's what the jack is gonna use, and he's gonna grab in there.
Yep.
Imagine one mullet versus 6, 7 jacks. One jack cuts from the front, another one from the back, another one from any other direction. That it's over for that mullet.
Yep.
I've seen that happen with snook. I've seen that happen with bluefish, mackerel, even smaller jacks. A big pack of jacks will come in and they will eat everything. Even at the bridge, I was hooking snook on while trying to catch moonfish. The jacks will come in and they will eat the snook.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I figure that like I wasn't really into this big powers at the beginning. You
So
you kind of grow into the style.
explain to people who might not be watching but listening what you're holding there. Like, 'cause some people are
Uh,
only gonna be listening to this, but you've got a gigantic popper in your hand. Like the kind of stuff,
so
like you said, that you see people like in like Polynesia throwing for GTs.
yeah, so in like 2017, I was using this, and this was a very big lure for me.
And what that's like a 5-inch
This is a
spook.
5 inch spook.
Yeah.
I upgraded the hooks on it, and this was the biggest lure that I would throw.
Right.
But as you get into the game, into the big fish mentality, you realize that the big fish, the big snook, the big jack, they would rather eat a chunk, which is easier.
Mhm.
They would rather eat a really big bait one time and then chill for like 3, 4 days.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
The big fish, they are not gonna be as aggressive as the 20-pound, like the 40-pound jacks, they won't be as chasers as the 20 and 30-pound jacks. Because what happens is the 20 and 30, they're faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're gonna eat more baits, but I've seen many times where there's this 15, 17-inch mullet getting hit on a seawall, getting chewed up, but yet nothing can eat it. And that's when the big jack comes in and I'm like, all right, it's my turn.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I did. I mean, I was throwing this, but imagine throwing this thing on an inlet when it's rough at night. Nobody's gonna see it.
Right. Yep.
Nobody's gonna see it. So I started with a popper, like a 5 inch popper. This is a 6.3.
Okay.
I was using the VMC hooks. and I was getting the medium-sized jacks, but it was up to that. It was up to that point. As I went up in my experience in my career, I realized that the big fish, they want big baits. Yeah, I mean, elephant eats peanuts, but how often can you do it?
Yeah.
How often can you catch a 40-pound jack on 15-pound mono? Is that realistic? That's why I get into this persona of I'm going heavy and I'm going to land a fish.
Yep.
And with the hooks that I was using before, I wasn't getting it done. So the only way was for me to use what I used today. Lockdown Saltigas, 130-pound braid, 200 liters with an FG. I tie the FG a lot. That's my main knot.
That's 200-pound mono. Is that what you said? So you got a 200-pound like leader of mono with an FG knot to your 150-pound main line braid.
Yeah. And
that mono is just there to kind of like help you if they're running you around rocks or just abrasion resistance.
While I was fishing for jacks with the hand line, they were breaking me off on 150.
Yeah.
Because there was so much pressure that a jack's mouth is like very, very solid. They got small teeth, but they can cut.
Right.
So when you set a hook on it, like when a fish eats very close to you, it's a big bait, and you pull really hard. You gotta add up the pressure that the fish is putting against you, and the one that you putting also when you pull.
Right.
So if a fish swallows the bait the whole way, now he's got the mono in his mouth, and you do one big pull on it because you gotta set the hook very hard. It's got like very tough mouth.
Mm-hmm.
What's gonna happen is, boom. And you're gonna get shaped on 150. And people, they don't understand that because if you have a 4,500 size reel and like a 17 to 30 pound rod, that's never gonna happen because the rod is gonna bend too much. You're gonna have a lot of leverage, and it's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
But when you use heavy tackle, when I hook those jags, I mean, it's so much pressure that they jump. They try to take off like so hard.
Yeah.
And there's just lug drag, like they try to go down and they go whoop.
Just pulls them up. Yeah.
And it's the funnest thing ever because like you have the power now. This isn't the time where they were eating your lure and they were smoking you and you couldn't land them and you couldn't know what to do. This is the time when you have figured out what you did like years before, figure them out, and now you actually go and target them. My first year with lures, I got more jacks than the 2 years behind that I was using light bait.
Right.
So like that was incredible for me, and my dad couldn't even believe it because I used to get home, and he would tell me, "Hey, bring a jack." I will bring a jack today, and three days later, I will bring another like 35-pound jack, and then he's like, "How are you getting this?" Because I know that you're not fishing on the bridge, so like, how is it? And that's when you get to kind of learn which spots are better than others. Like a lot of people ask me like, what do you fish? What do you fish? What do you fish? I mean, you gotta, like, if you want to catch northern snakeheads, you gotta be on that land. You gotta be on that on that pond. If you want to catch the 10-pound bass, you gotta go to a lake that holds a specific amount of bait, or to a healthy lake mainly.
Yeah.
For that fish to grow into that size, because it's really hard to go to like a spool, like like somewhere that you wouldn't expect a big fish to to grow in. There is
Right, right.
enough prey. There is enough space. You kind of have to go to those spots, and that's what I figure. I mean, I if I wanted to catch those really big fish, I'm gonna have to find where are the best spots,
Yeah.
and that's done by going as often as you can. You gotta go there. You gotta figure out where are the factors into those big fish.
Yeah.
Where are they eating? When are they eating? Did they already ate? Did you think that you missed the bite? Like what's the bait around? Are they there? Like jacks, they're always on the move. So like
Right, right.
the main thing that you got to do is find a pattern on those fish. I have a beach that then I go to, and those jacks they go there very early in the morning when it's rough. Only when it's rough. Like if you go there a day before and it's a little bit calm, you will never find them.
Okay.
Like people will put drones. You can do anything. They won't be there. But when the water conditions are at the speak, like you got rough weather, you got the toothpaste, watercolor. That's when the bluefish come in to feed. That's when the small snook they get comfortable with feeding. That's when the mackerel come in to feed. And then that's when the big school of jacks like comes out of nowhere and eats everything up.
Yeah, that's interesting because
Um,
I know I noticed that in your pictures is like when I look at your pictures, it's you're never out there on what looks like a nice, calm, peaceful day. It always
no,
looks like
no,
giant waves crashing. Because
the fish are not
I had
there.
wondered like how the hell are you working the popper in that? Like, and that was
But
kind of part of it too. Is like, how are you seeing the fish? Are you throwing out there you just know that they're there, or like how are you kind of like verifying it? Like
that's
when you
that's
scan the water, is it just kind of a guessing game based on your knowledge and your experience, or
uh,
are you seeing them?
it's it's a mixture. So that's when I go back to I will never be able to use this anymore. For those big fish, I can't because in that big water, it's not gonna get noticed. And
Right,
even if
right.
it does, you're gonna catch a 5, 10 pound fish, and I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to go into the big fish and to the fish that I really want to catch. Because like that's the problem with people. They say, oh, I want a 45-inch snook, I want a 40-pound jack. Yeah, but are you there when the bite is happening? Are you using what the fish want? Most of the time, they're fitting into a big mackerel. Those big jacks, they want to eat once, and with reason. Like it's very hard for a jack when it's calm and clear
Hmm.
to trap a bait. They can't really trap a bait because what I've learned is that the 40-pound jacks, 45-pound jacks, they will only hang out with fish of their size. You
That's
wouldn't see
interesting.
a
Yeah.
40, 45-pound jack hanging with a 20-pounder.
Right.
That never really happens. And I saw
Huh.
that at the bridge when I told you earlier about that night that I put the mullet in, and two of them about the same size, the biggest that I have seen, came right there on it. And I've seen that every time during the mullet run. You see the small school of jacks coming in, destroying the finger mullets, but the big jacks are not there at all.
Right, right.
So what happens is when it gets like really rough, you got the southeast wind or the northeast. That's when those big fish they will use that in their advantage. And when they're feeding on big bluefish, like 3, 4 pound bluefish, mackerel, like big size mackerel, snook. I've seen them eat snook before. I've
Yeah.
seen them even chase a baby nurse shark on
Oh
the
man.
on
Yeah.
the on the shore. This is the only thing that you can throw to get those fish attention. This is what will get noticed, and it's a big lure. It's like with the hooks with the
Now
these
that popper
are
looks like
DKKs.
and you're holding a giant popper there. It looks like it has taken a hell of a beating. Do you normally
Yeah.
fish it with just one hook there on the back, or
No, no. I do this on purpose a lot so that I could show you a tip on how to rig the hooks.
okay?
A lot of people they just rig them, like it's fine. Yeah, and it will be fine for most of the time. Most of the jacks that I catch, I always catch them on the same hook. There are 6 hooks in here. Most of the time, I always get them on this hook right here,
Okay.
the same hook.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you
weird.
will see that My treble hooks, two of them are sharp and one of them is messed up.
Yeah, yeah.
You will see that very often, and that comes with the placement of the hook. You see that this hook is fishing like that,
Okay.
and this hook would always face the front. So you will put it on split ring. This is a 250-pound split ring,
Okay.
and the hook is a BKK T-Rex. No, BKK GT Rex and size 6/0. It's huge.
Yeah, these are monster hooks for anybody that's just
here,
listening.
I did it wrong. You see that you got two in front of it. Like many people would think that this is two is better, but no, those fish actually miss it over here. And if they do get hooked on one, and then the other, then they will use that as the leverage. So like.
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get one point of contact that's like kind of facing the front side of the popper.
One point of contact, yeah. So like this. See the hook facing that way?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
I always get him on this hook. And as you can see on the popper, most of the bites, they're on the head.
Right, yeah.
When a big fish will eat like a mackerel or a bluefish, they will rarely start with the tail. You will see that with pythons. You will see that with just about every predator. They start with the head and swallow it down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I get most of my baits over here.
That's interesting. That's now that is a good like detailed experience tip there. I want to touch on one thing interesting about just jacks just in general. It's kind of an interesting dynamic with that species of fish. And so there's like some parallels with like why my interest is kind of in this style of fishing is, you know, in freshwater, especially freshwater, it seems like there's a big divide between what's considered a sport fish, what's considered like an other fish or a trash fish or an unwanted species.
Yeah.
And then I noticed since I've come to the coastline, saltwater's kind of got that. But very interestingly to me is for whatever reason, it seems like jacks are kind of cast into that same category. I'm curious, like your opinion, and I think some of what you've shed light on, the fact that they're probably breaking a lot of people off. People are probably getting spooled. They're probably losing their favorite lures. They're probably just their rods are breaking. The gears are burning out on their reels. Why do you think the disdain for a fish that clearly grows so big, fights so hard, I mean, that can be, I don't know, enjoyed by anybody?
I think that I mean I've always had that. I've always heard negative criticism about jack, and I've always heard a hype about snooks. I've always heard the hype about tarpon, even bonefish.
Yeah,
like, people who love bonefish. Okay, but the thing is that like it's a market-based fishery. Nowadays, everything is visual. It's like I'm probably the only guy in my area that throws popper, and I think that I'm the only guy that fishes the heaviest for jack in Florida. As you might tackle.
That's definitely what I have seen just looking through the internet. Is I don't know. You're like sitting on the top of that mountain.
I fish the heaviest for jacks, and because I really want to get the biggest jacks, and like what people perceive the idea of jacks is that 5-pound jack that is crazy and that would hit any lure and they're an easy fish. But everything switches when a jack reaches to the 40-pound size. Now, I've had people that are snook fishermen, like hardcore snook fishermen. They're like, man, I'm tired of this. I want something that pulls.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, look at you. And then they want to fish with me. And when they come, they're fishing with 60-pound leaders and all of that. And they're getting smoked. They can't land the fish. They're getting smoked, and they either like fall in love with it, like they go at it like a bunch of nights in and then, or they just back up completely. Because like the big jacks, they weren't even as as common as it used to be. You can talk to the old timers and like in Palm Beach or Boynton, where in like the earlier 2000s, where we had more seawalls and less docks and more mullet run. There were bigger schools of jacks, and people were getting their records. They were getting like 40 founding partners. It was easier back then, but now they have due to the fact that like, or due to the belief that there are a lot of them, they mainly got used for shark bait,
Yeah.
chum, commercial fishing, and on and on. And since they were easier to catch, there was a lot of them and into the market. And another thing is that jacks they have red meat, so like the only real incentive for the jacks is like to have some fun, you know, because like they are not really good eating, and the 5 pounders they're kind of easier to catch. So people discard it
Yeah.
as trash fish completely.
Right.
But when you change into the size of the jack, you realize
Right.
that it's very very hard to get.
Well, there.
It's very hard, and when you do, you got to have the right tackle for it because
Yeah.
it's gonna smoke you.
Yeah.
It's
Well, the
gonna
way
wrap you
you're doing
around.
it, uh it's so awesome looking because you mentioned earlier like the guys over there in Australia and where they're fishing for GTs. It's basically like our version of a GT. I mean, you're
Hmm.
using similar, if not the exact same tactics. You're catching a
Yeah,
fish that has the same eye appeal, has the same sporting qualities. It's essentially almost the same fish, maybe minus not getting quite to the same size. But I think the experience of the pursuit of going after that kind of fish, like there's so many parallels there. And I
yeah,
think more people like me who see what you're doing are gonna like. I feel like that's could catch on. Maybe that's a bad thing for you. I don't know. You're kind of in a good position right now where you've like cornered that market of fish, but I don't know. I know we're winding down on time here, which stinks because I may have to bring you back on because we didn't even get into using poppers to catch sharks, which is like I feel like that's a topic in and of itself.
yeah.
But the jacks thing is it's
Mainly, yeah,
outrageous.
yeah. Mainly with sharks also, it's you're looking for the same conditions, the
Yeah.
exact same conditions. You're looking for that in rough weather, and what happens is, let's say that you got school of bluefish, they will be feeding on like bait or whatever. But once those jacks come around, those bluefish freak out. They go on the surface,
Yeah.
the blackfish will come in, the jacks will come in, and they will tear everything up. Now, the sharks they don't attack the jacks. They will hunt together.
That
They
is
they
crazy.
they wouldn't bite each other. I've seen that happen multiple
Yeah.
times. They wouldn't bite each other. They hunt together. But the moment that you hook a jack, even if it's big and the shark senses the vibration of
Oh yeah,
stress,
yeah.
it will get sharp. And that's why I also use 400 and even 600 pound mono. Because
Yeah, I
like
saw your
I'm
videos of you tying knots with 400
yeah,
pound line. That's
yeah,
interesting there.
yeah. I can tie a knot like pretty easy on a lure with 600,
Yeah.
or do an FG with 600 to 100 pound braid.
And you prefer that over just using like a I don't know, a crimp? Like
Yeah, definitely, definitely. If I can tie a knot over here, I mean, in my opinion, my knots are stronger than the crimp,
yeah.
and I don't have to depend on anything else. I with my skill, I can just tie the knot. I'm ready to fish. If I need to switch out the lures, I also use these that I got the idea from the guys in Australia, which is a solid ring
Okay.
and then a split ring, and then I will toss one of these to it, and then I can switch lures in and out, or I can use like a tactical angle split,
Yeah.
and then I can switch the lures. So with the sharks, it's very similar. There are times when I think that I have to like wrap it up. Last year on December, the water got really rough. The bluefish were in, the mackerel were in. There were some big jacks and some big blackfish as well.
Yeah.
I was catching both fish, and made a cast, bring in the popper, bring it in. The black tip comes in, hits the popper, starts jumping, line starts going out. You got to go very, very light drag. Now it's the opposite. We actually got to go tight drag. Don't let them pull, because they'll get you around the rock. But with black tips, since it's too much, and then jumping all, you got to go light. You got to hook him, let him freak out, let him do his thing, let him jump around. After the first run, they're most likely going to come in.
Yeah.
So that day, I made a cast, hooked the big black, and started jumping everywhere. Mid-fight, I'm like, this fish like grew, like he got stronger.
Yeah.
Bring it in. And when I bring it up, it's a 40-pound jack. I'm like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
The jack took the lure out of the blackfish mouth.
Oh my gosh.
And
now you have a video of that on your Instagram, right?
Yeah, I did.
I saw that because you were going wild and crazy over that happening. So
yeah, and I never expected that. And that's when, like they really hunt together and they would compete with each other. Yeah. They want the same kind of situations. They're gonna use it as an advantage to eat. And on the calm base where they can't really eat, they're just gonna lay down on that and feed off of that restored fat that they have and just wait for that day to go off again. Now, there are times where it's not rough for like a month or 2 months. And that's when night fishing comes in. Mm-hmm. Now, those fish, they can't feed during the day. But if you go at night to where there's a lot of current or to where like the bridges, the inlets, when you know that it's a fish highway, the fish have to go there regardless.
Yeah.
They're going to be swimming with their eyes up like that, just going fast and just looking for a valley hoop to skip the surface, anything. That's when the popper comes in. There's a lot of splash out at nighttime. The big poppers, meaning this one, where you can just say stick bait. This is stick bait.
Jesus, look at that thing.
BKKs for everything. This hooks, they got a lot of potential in the Florida market.
I feel like I'd be afraid to hook a shark with the treble hook. Like I'm curious how you'd even get that out of there.
Yeah, with the BKK, since they have a very small barb.
Okay, barbless, yeah. It's a small barb. Okay, I see.
Barb, yeah. It's actually easier to get them out.
So you're buying those hooks. You're buying those hooks separately and then adding them to the popper.
Wait, what?
You're buying those hooks separately and then adding them. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I buy them from upstate because in here, like nobody really uses the BKK unless you're going for tarpon. Or that's it. That's the market for them. Tarpon, because like nobody really targets jacks or black tips on the BKKs. They prefer to do a single hook and like a 7-inch popper, something that they can have fun with like a light reel that the shark can jump and all, and that's really fun too. Well,
I know we're gonna start winding this one down. I hate to, but I will say, I mean, now living in Florida, obviously there's so many types of fishing that you can do in this state. And just for me personally, and just the whole landscape that we have in this state and all the opportunities to catch different kinds of fish or do different styles of fishing, I'm not lying when I tell you, like, what you're doing over there with those gigantic jacks, throwing those huge lures in that rough, crazy water, that's probably the number one thing that I want to experience here. So, and I hope to do that soon. I just recently bought like a setup, although you kind of like I don't know. I feel like I'm already messed up.
Some of it.
Yeah. Well, I spooled up with 80-pound braid and then you said all that. I was like, damn it. I was like, oh, no.
But, 80 is good. It is good. When you're fishing from the beach, 80 is good.
Okay.
80 isn't plenty enough, man. And even like for the beach, like you will be okay with 65. But there are beaches that you have plain sand.
Yep.
And even if it's rough, there's nothing there to attract bait or predators.
Yeah.
So those baits, they're going to be piled up on a bar made out of rocks at the front, where they will come in. They're not going to get so beat up by the waves. That's when the jack will come in, and that's where when you hook one, they will wrap you on a rock. They will cut you on the edge of a jetty.
Yep.
And that's when the things that you want to avoid, that's when you face them. And when you hook them, you got to get them out, because
Yep.
you want to land the big fish. You want to as I say, as become a better fisherman by catching the bigger size fish, because that's the true test. You can say that you're amazing, but at the same time, you don't catch a big fish, and when you do,
Right.
it's
The big
once
ones
a
will
year.
always humble you. So yeah, but yeah, man, that's one I want to do very soon. I'm a little busy the next couple weekends, but I'm really eager to get over there. So if I do, either I'll try to join you or I'll be picking your brains, texting you like crazy, asking just for tips on the fly.
Yeah, sure.
But man, that's a big one. I was curious, so I wanted to ask like a final questions. If you like, what is on your? I think we all have them, but what is like your bucket list trip? If you had the money and you had the finances to go anywhere right now, tomorrow, to board a plane, what would
I
be
would
your
do.
trip?
I would do right now. I would do two trips. One
Okay.
is to go to Argentina and get the Dorados on the big dam that
Oh
they have
yeah,
over
yeah.
there on poppers. Have you seen those videos where the
Yes, I've
Dorados
got
just
some. I've
go
got some connections that
crazy after
run
the
those
poppers?
tours. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's an awesome one. Yeah,
that one, and
I'm
the
right there
second one
with
is
you.
definitely Australia. Australia for the big GTs on the
Big GTs.
reefs.
You know what's amazing about those rocks is like they're getting marlin from the rocks. They're getting those big, like, I mean, they're getting all kinds of pelagic fish from land. But yeah, I'm right there with you. That's
Yeah.
that is some of the coolest videos out there on all of like the social thing. But anyway, you're doing something similar here in Florida, and I'm telling you,
Yeah.
anybody that's listening, if you want to see, I mean, you have to see the size and caliber of the jacks that this guy's catching. But if somebody wants to see that, like, where would they find you? What's like your Instagram? Where can they go to
Mainly on my
contact you? Or
Instagram, David Rocca. David underscore Rocca with two C's.
okay, so there's ROCCA.
Yeah.
All right, well, David, man, I really appreciate your time. You may be a guy because you were very fluid with your conversation. I
Yeah.
wasn't having to provoke you to tell me your story, and very fascinating story. One of like
Yeah.
very humble beginnings. So, man, your story of like
I
where you came from, your progression as an angler, and I want to mention one more thing too because I circled it and I put a star next to it because it was very impactful to me. That scenario where you had sort of a negative encounter with other maybe more established or equipped anglers that was sort of like a negative experience. So you're a young guy still trying to learn,
Yeah.
and they gave you a hard time. That's something that I feel like you could touch on even deeper. But like, I don't know, man. Like the people that are listening, like I feel like we have a social responsibility to the younger people that are coming up. That if you're approached by a young person who's eager and
Yeah.
interested, and like they're wide open, like they're just open, ready for you to like plant that seed. It
hmm
is like our responsibility as real stewards of fishing and the outdoors to be like a voice of reason, not somebody that's
Yeah.
says, "Hey, you're supposed to be an a-hole," or "Hey, this is what you act like when you learn what you're doing," because it passes on a real negative vibe. So I hated
hmm
hearing that, but at the same time, you're a guy who clearly paved your own path and did things the hard way. So at least I
Yeah.
know you weren't impressionable to the point that's like, okay, well, whatever. I'm gonna do it my way regardless. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. The way that I have learned is definitely by example. By
Yep.
example, and before people used to fish for jacks like that, but not at least that as I'm aware, not at the level that I do. And I always take my time to teach people something.
Yep.
I
Yep.
get questioned all the time how to use it, and my best advice is if you want the big fish, if you close your eyes and you see yourself catching that big fish, forget about what is known or what is expected. Find your own way into catching that fish that you want. If even if that means making your own lure, fishing your own way. At the end of the day, like when you're 70, 80 years old, what's gonna matter is like, wow, I really worked hard and I got the big fish, and I had fun doing it and I taught others how to fish as well, and I grew as a person and I help also other people mm, mm, to grow in the fishing community. Because a lot of guys they're good at what they do, but they wouldn't look at you.
Yep.
They don't. look at anybody else, they want to catch they want to do their own, and they wouldn't take any time into helping us. Like they're making a mistake. Here, like this is a way that you could work it better. I have nights where I'm fishing with poppers, and there's the new guy that comes in. He sees me fishing with poppers, and he can't get anything. I tell him, hey, here's a popper.
Yeah.
That's how my two friends that fish with me. That's how they got their biggest jacks. I gave them a popper.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Mike, as you know him, the fish were biting. He got broken up because he was using 50-pound braid. He was undergone. He lost his poppers. He looked at me like, yeah, just grab whatever you want. Just grab one. I tied him up for him, made a cast. He got like a 40-pounder on December.
Right. Well, that's awesome, man. I got to jump off of here. I got another guy lined up in a little bit, but
Sure.
I don't know if you're willing, you may be a guy that I reach out to bring back on, because dude, your story's awesome, and it's been really cool getting to know like the man and like the actual human being behind the Instagram photos. I mean, that's why I started this thing. It's we need to get back to having these real conversations and not just existing behind social media clicks, likes, comments, things like that. So I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you very much, David.
Yep. You have a good one. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you.